5 weeks ago, we concluded our Easter gathering with a statement that we believe that everyone is either running towards or away from the resurrection of Jesus. And we then followed that statement up with, if you happen to be someone who's running away from the resurrection of Jesus, or feel like there's distance that's being created between you and the resurrection of Jesus, maybe there's some obstacles or hurdles or just things that are in the way, would you be so bold as to just say them or ask those questions? And so we put up a QR code that you could submit questions anonymously. And we just said, hey, there's no hard question that's off limits. You can ask any question that you like. Ask all of them. If it's a big deal and it's keeping you from running towards the resurrection of Jesus, then we want you to ask. And so about 120-something questions came in. Most of those questions fit in some type of category where over the last 5 weeks now, we have attempted to answer as many of those questions as possible. And now certainly there will be some that we won't quite get to in this series, but we will answer them throughout messages the rest of the year. But they're questions that are honestly a little simpler in terms of how we answer them. We could answer them in probably 90 seconds, and it wouldn't be something we needed to devote an entire Sunday morning or message series to. And so on top of that, we also prioritized messages that were submitted by people who self-identified as not followers of Jesus. Because while those of you who are followers of Jesus have really good questions, the idea was, hey, is there something distancing you from Jesus that's a hurdle? And so we wanted to make sure that we prioritize those questions. And so that's how we arrived at the questions we've been walking through and answering over the last 5 weeks. And so we get to today, which 3 weeks ago I gave you a warning if you had children that last week and this week would be a little difficult. And obviously, it's up to you as a parent. If you got kids that are sitting in here, last week I gave you about a 9 to 14 minute window, letting you know that part was coming. I don't have that long. You've got about 35 seconds. And we're going to jump into it. This question or category that we're going to talk about today had the largest number of questions submitted around the same type of idea. Well over 10% of all of the questions in total fit and were almost identical, or at least very similar. And so I've chosen 4 of those questions in total to read to you that really gives you an idea of what we want to accomplish this morning with our question and answer series, week 5. So here is question 1 of 4. Does God really hate gay people? I struggle with viewing God as hateful. Question 2. If God creates all life equally and promises to love and cherish us as long as we devote ourselves to Him, why is it such a sin to love the same gender? Question 3. I grew up being taught that if you are gay, you will go to hell. I am not gay myself, but I know many gay people in my life. They are great people, much better than I am in some ways. I've always wondered if they're such great people, are they really going straight to hell just because of that sin in their life? Question 4. Why will I be damned to hell when I have no control over the way I feel? And I was born this way. Those are really important questions. Now, when it comes to answering this question or these questions as a whole, I think it's important for us to establish a bit of common ground first. And this common ground is essential not just for this conversation, it's essential for any really difficult conversation. When we think through this, it's in our mission statement that you hear me say at the close of every gathering. And Jesus is in the lead. That yes, we want to create a You Belong Here movement where people are the destination, but at the end of the day, everything that we do, we want Jesus to be at the forefront, that Jesus takes the first steps and we take the next steps, that we want Jesus to lead out. And so our goal this week is the same as it is every week. And it's my hope that your goal today is the same as it is every week. That our goal every week is to follow Jesus. Now, where this gets difficult is when people think that Jesus is leading in one way, and then another group of people think Jesus is leading in another way. Like, it's one thing for us to say, well, yeah, this is what Jesus thinks, but I don't like what Jesus says. I want to do my own thing. Well, then we can have a conversation about that and say, well, why do you trust you more than Jesus? But when two different groups of people say, well, no, I think this is what Jesus thinks, and this group of people says, no, I think this is what Jesus thinks, and it's like, well, which Jesus are we following? So even though we've created common ground of we want to follow Jesus, the question is, where is Jesus leading? And that, when that is taking place in our conversations or in our disagreements, and we have two different Jesuses, then it puts us in a place where division is just ripe. Like it is ready to take hold in those moments. This is a conversation that can create division. My hope is that I have built enough trust with my friends who are part of the LGBTQ community, and that they would allow me to lead a little bit of a Bible study this morning and answer the questions that have been asked. On subject matter like this, rarely, if ever, does a sermon change a perspective. So that's not my goal today. My goal is to be a pastor at Foundation that has integrity and told you could ask hard questions and me answer those hard questions. And if I'm honest with you, I don't prefer to answer this difficult and this personal a question in this type of forum. I've answered this question dozens and dozens of times over the last 6.5 years with us being a church. And all of the times those questions have been answered, those conversations have been had over coffee or dinner or in my office where we sat down and we looked at the whites of each other's eyes and we had a conversation. I don't prefer it, not because anything changes in terms of what I have to say, but in terms of this isn't really an environment or a forum where you get to talk back. Like it's just, I get to just talk. And I think this particular conversation calls for more of a conversation than it does just people listening. That being said, I also do want to be a man of integrity and answer the hard questions when they're asked, because that's what I told you we would do. Now, when we think about this question, if you've grown up in the church, or maybe you've even done some Bible study, or this particular question has been something that's resonated with you in your own life, then it's possible that you've done a lot of research. It's possible that as soon as you kind of heard the questions, you were like, I know where we're going. Because there's some really popular passages of Scripture that will be pulled out and quoted when we have this conversation. Maybe Romans chapter 1 comes to mind. Or maybe it's one of the passages out of Leviticus, which there's a couple. Maybe there's some really popular ones that are like, okay, these are prohibition passages that very clearly state, this is not what I want you to do, right? Like we have those come to mind very easily because they're thrown around all the time. Whether anyone understands what they mean or what they don't mean, they're easy for us to throw wherever we want to. However, I would say that there's actually a better question to start with. And honestly, I think it's a very simple question. What does Jesus tell us marriage is supposed to be? And I think that's the best question to ask, because the church already has this reputation. It's our own fault. The global church has a reputation. It's our own fault. That people outside of the church see Christianity as a list of things you cannot do. But when we actually read the Bible, and you actually read the life of Jesus, and you actually read the writings that come about because of the life and teachings of Jesus, you don't find a list of things you're not supposed to do over and over again. Instead, you find moments where Jesus speaks into who you are supposed to be, not what you're supposed to stop doing. Now, there's a couple of things. When people ask direct questions, he will give a direct answer. But overwhelmingly, Jesus' message is what you should be, or who you should be, or what you should do, not what you should stop doing. And Jesus says things like, you should love God with everything you have, heart, soul, mind, strength, right? You should love your neighbor as yourself. You should be humble. You should be generous. You should deny yourself. You should die to yourself. Those are the messages of Jesus. And so when he starts wrapping his mind and his teaching around, hey, what do I want the people that are listening to hear from me? He's trying to tell them, look, you can't actually be like me by not doing things. The only way you can be like me is for you to live like me. So let me tell you how to live like me. And the things you're not supposed to do, well, I think they'll probably take care of themselves if your desire every morning when you wake up is, I want to be just like Jesus. Now, that principle applies not just to today's question, it applies to every single one of us, every single day of our life. So when we ask the question, what does Jesus tell us about this? I think we should listen. I mean, is marriage the union between two consensual adults who fall in love and are committed to each other? Or is marriage the union between two sexually different persons? There's two views. There's an affirming view and a historically Christian view. The affirming view believes the Bible is misunderstood in regards to same-sex and marriage. That the Bible never had in mind adult consensual same-sex marriage and intimacy. And the historically Christian view would say that Christian marriage is between two people of the opposite sex who are followers of Jesus. Now, to get to a place, I think we've got to do a little bit of Bible study. And so I want to lead you through a very brief one. Let's start in Genesis. Genesis 1:27 says this. And so God created mankind in his own image. The image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now, when we have this description of creation, what we have is a very important distinction that sex difference is an important part of creation as a whole. And I don't know why God made this decision. I don't know why God said, hey, I could describe Adam and Eve with any other attributes. I could say anything that I wanted to let them know that they are different people. But for some reason, the Creator decided to make a descriptor or to make sure that there was a distinction between two people, and he called them male and female. Man and woman. Now, why did he do that? I don't know. I haven't asked. And I don't know if I did ask, if he would tell me. All I do know is that when he decided to describe what he created, there was a sex difference. We fast forward just one chapter to Genesis 2:20 through 23. It says, but for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. Now, there's two things that we want to make sure that we reference here. The first thing is that this story that is told in Genesis, this creation account, where we have this description of how God started humanity, we always have this picture of Adam, and then he's missing a rib. But the word, or the Hebrew word for rib, it's not actually anywhere else when this word is used. It's not used to describe rib. It's the word selah, and it means side of a sacred space most often. Like if you can picture the temple, and the side of the temple, like that would be what is referred to as the Selah. And so when you have an image, I think it's a little more PG to think, oh, he put Adam into a deep sleep and he removed just a bone and then he made woman. But the actual image is he put Adam into a deep sleep and he ripped off his side. And that's how he made woman, right? It's flesh and bone, like the whole thing. That's why Adam says, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. It's not just bone of my bone, which that makes it make sense. Like, why does he say flesh? Because he took the whole side. Now, how that works, I'm not sure. This is just the creation account that we have. The second thing we need to take notice of when we read this is the word suitable. It says, but for Adam, no suitable helper was found. Now, in the creation account, we've got these opposites that seem to be happening. We create night and day. We create the sky and the land, right? We have these opposites that are happening, the sun, the moon. And all of a sudden, we get to Adam, and it's just one. And he's looking, it's like, okay, there's nothing suitable to be connected to Adam. The word suitable in Hebrew is a combination of two words. The first word is K, K-E, but pronounced K. It means as, like, or similar. The second word that it's combined with is neged, which means opposite, in front of, or against. And so when we think about the word suitable, it's like, but different. In fact, we can fill in the blank here. The passage gives us the answer, but we have the freedom to fill in this blank however you want to. You are welcome to put any word there that you wish. I'll share it with you. Like in that she is human. Different in that she is blank. And how you fill in that blank, it informs your understanding of biblical marriage. Now, the passage, when we think through like critical reading and we're finding the answer in the passage that's giving, the answer is there, right? The answer is there. We can read it and we can say, yeah, like in that she's human, different in that she's female. However, no one forces you to fill in the blank that way. And so you can put anything you want to there. It might not be in the passage, but you're welcome to put anything in the blank that you wish. Now, it doesn't change what it says, but it does change how we will then perceive what comes in terms of our thoughts and beliefs around marriage based on how we fill in that blank. And you might say, well, why does that blank matter so much? Well, it's because of the very next verse forces it to matter so much. Verse 24 says this, and that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. In other words, that's why. Like the whole reason that happens is because of what we just established, how you filled in the blank. Now, I think the gorgeous thing there is that in Genesis it says that they'll become one flesh. Now, if we just back up to Genesis chapter 1, before Adam and Eve, before the side was taken, they were already one flesh. And so their separation simply puts back together what it was in the beginning. That's why it's so gorgeous. But I also understand that this is a struggle. Especially when we think through, well, Clint, isn't Genesis in the Old Testament? Like, isn't there other things in the Old Testament that are just way out there that's like, hey, we don't do that? I mean, the Old Testament says things like if you wear clothing of mixed fabrics, that there's a lot of punishment. And if you eat bacon, it's a no-no. Like the Old Testament's full of a lot of things. It's like, hey, we don't follow those things. Why would we follow this thing? I think it's a really great question. I think it's one that we ought to take time and kind of walk through. However, in this particular instance, it's a little quicker walkthrough only because, again, the question I asked at the beginning wasn't what does Genesis say about marriage? It was what does Jesus say about marriage? And Jesus, when asked about marriage, quotes Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 2:22 through 24. In fact, he not only quotes them, when he's asked about marriage, he puts them together in one big paragraph. He says this to a bunch of biblical scholars. He says, haven't you read? In other words, he already knows they've read it. But haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Jesus makes a direct link between sex difference in Genesis 1:27 and the reason that a man would leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Now, I'll be honest with you. I have now spent 8 minutes and 30 seconds walking you through one of the simplest Bible studies you can do on this particular topic. 8 minutes, 30 seconds, right? But to be honest with you, I haven't even scratched the surface in a complete picture of the biblical idea and what Jesus expects of us in this area. That is why we've got a resource that's available today, because I'm going to stop here with the Bible study and get to another piece of the question. This, by far, is the greatest resource I have ever found that helps answer these questions. There's not anything out there better. I've been living in this tension with friends of mine that I care deeply about for well over a decade now. And so I've had lots and lots of conversations, and we've done a lot of Bible study back and forth. This, by far, is the greatest resource. However, I will tell you this, there's rules if you want to buy it. It's $5 today. If you don't want to buy it here, we've got a link to Amazon at the blue tent outside. But there's rules. If you're a Foundation family, I'm telling you, don't break the rule. Trust me, don't break the rule. Before you read anything in this book, you've got to read, starting on page 17, How to Have a Fruitful Conversation. There's 21 different conversations in here of the biggest questions asked about, but what about this? And what about this? And how about this? And why this? Every single one of them, he does such an incredible job at pointing out the holes in the Christian argument as well as the holes in the secular argument, and talking about the common ground with both of them and how you walk methodically through the holistic story of the Bible. It is phenomenal. But if you don't read foundation number 1, how to have a fruitful conversation, it's a waste of your time. Because if you don't get that, it makes no difference how many Bible verses you know or what kind of answer you have. Agreed? In addition to this resource, there is a website. It's incredible, by the way. The guy that wrote the book and that is a part of this Center for Faith and Sexuality, his name is Dr. Preston Sprinkle. He could have a better last name, for sure. Dr. Preston Sprinkle. He's absolutely phenomenal. I think we can throw a QR code up if you want to go to the website. This has got videos. If you're a parent that has children that are a part of the LGBTQ community, and you're like, hey, how do I have conversations in them or with them? It's incredible resources. If you want books to read that go even further into it, incredible resources. If you want to read through a more academic approach, incredible resources. If you yourself are a part of the LGBTQ community and you're like, hey, I want to learn more, I want to know more, I'm telling you, it's an incredible resource. And this guy is legit. He's legit. He's not talking about it from an academic perspective as someone who just walks through theory. Some of his closest and best friends are a part of the community. It's deeply personal. And the resources that are there are just phenomenal. Some of them cost funds, and we've already invested in this. And so if you get to it and you're like, hey, I want to know and I want to watch these videos or whatever, reach out to me first before you spend anything, because there's a possibility that we've already purchased it and I can give you access to the resources ahead of time. Now, I say that these will be at the blue tent as soon as we're done. Like I said, they're $5 today, and the website is just QR code, scan it, and you go there. With that, I need to address something else. While I think the biblical idea of what God's expectations for us sexually are very clear inside of the Bible, this is whether you are a married person or whether you're single or whether you're attracted to the same sex or the opposite sex, his sexual expectations for us are incredibly clear. However, there is a lie that I need to address this morning, and we need to address it in a very clear and concise way. Here's the lie: that you must choose to love and affirm same-sex relationships, or you must condemn and hate the LGBTQ community. And that's not true. It's not true, and I'm telling you from my own personal experience, I live in a completely different reality than that. It's a lot of hard work, but people are worth it. Our mission statement says we're on a mission to create a You Belong Here movement where people are the destination. The You Belong Here movement applies to everyone. The people are our destination is all people. However, the church is hesitant to tell this truth out of fear of being canceled by one side or deserted by the other. But the thing is, if we are to be people of integrity, we have to tell the truth. I need to be a man of integrity and point towards the trustworthy words of Jesus. However, as a Christian leader, I will let you know that as I say these, I fully do believe that I'm speaking on behalf of anyone who wants to be a part of Foundation. First, I affirm that the global church has not treated the LGBTQ community with kindness, compassion, and friendship. Rather, we have grown and fostered a culture of isolation, fear, and dehumanization that makes fellow children of God feel less than human and far from created by God. And the second thing that I have to affirm is that singling out LGBTQ people as particularly grievous sinners, while, for instance, a porn epidemic rages through the American church, is itself horrifically hypocritical. And Jesus would see through it if he were here with us today, and he would call us on it. A couple of years ago, there was a survey taken in the LGBTQ community, and the survey showed that 83% of that community was raised inside the church. 83%. 51% left the church after they turned 18. Here's the interesting thing. Only 3% left because of what the church taught and believed. 97% left because of the way they were treated. Words like they were dehumanized. Now I want to pause there and make sure we understand what I say when I say dehumanization or dehumanized. I think it's self-explanatory, but I just want to make sure we're covering it. It means that we talk about an issue like it's not real people. It's like we talk about a theory, or we talk about a concept, or we talk about a law maybe, or we talk about fill in the blank, where it's so disconnected from flesh and bone. It's disconnected from people that were created in the image of God. It's disconnected from people that like their heart beats just like anyone else in the entire world, and their heart hurts and their brain gets anxious and all of those things. And so when we begin to talk about things without including the idea of people, it dehumanizes them. Another word that was used for how they were treated is they were isolated. When everyone whispers quietly as they walk into the room. Maybe people pick up their things and move somewhere else. Or maybe they're the one individual that's always left out of the group text and constantly have to see their friends, they thought were friends, doing things on social media that they never got an invite to. A word like shunned, which led to the fourth thing that was described. They were kicked out of the church altogether. You see, I'm not so sure that the problem is God's expectations of us, because he makes it clear. I think the biggest issue is the way we've had conversations about these expectations. In 2022, you probably saw the headline. There was a pastor named Dylan Dawes, made headlines all over the country for his comments he made as he was delivering a message on a Sunday morning at Steadfast Baptist Church in Watauga, Texas. He told his congregation that gay people are dangerous to society, that all homosexuals are pedophiles, and they should be shot in the head. He followed that up with, they're not your average everyday sinners. They have no hope of salvation. And the truth is, though, when we read the Bible, if they don't have any hope of salvation, neither do I. This past week, I called some of my friends and just wanted to grab some perspective from folks that are in that community about, hey, walk me through what it feels like for someone like me to have this conversation with you sitting in the audience. And how do you process that, and what are you thinking through? And I just asked a bunch of questions and listened. And there's one friend in particular, she said something, and I asked if I could share that with you this morning, and she gave me permission. I've been in a relationship with this girl for, I think, 12 years now. Her name's Sarah. I love Sarah. And we've been through, golly, everything you can think of. And she wasn't dealt the greatest hand for life, that's for sure. And so she's been through a lot. Her and her wife moved to Pennsylvania just a few weeks back. And Sarah's been a part of Foundation since it started. And so it was a sad day when she caught me outside under the awning and said, hey, I'll never forget it. She said, hey, buddy, I'm moving to Pennsylvania this week. And I was like, Pennsylvania? It's cold up there. You know? So her and her wife moved, and so I was asking her, I asked my questions, and she answered my questions and gave me some insight and some thoughts. And so I got to a place where I was like, okay, thanks for sharing this with me. Thank you for taking some time. And so I asked her, I was like, so Sarah, how's church stuff? Have you found a church to get plugged into? And I know that seems like a pastor question to ask, but how's it going? Have you started looking? I got through this far out at 9. She said, I'm terrified to go. Which just sucks, because for 12 years, she's had a safe place that would give her hard answers, but I wouldn't let a single one of you hurt her. Of course, you said, well, I try to watch online, but I don't want online church. If you're watching online, sorry, it's just not the same. I don't want that for her. And I think for someone to think that, to be terrified to go to church, is unacceptable. I think it's unbiblical. And I'm confident that Jesus is not in the lead if that's the result. We live in a world as a church that has a lot of tension. A tension that Jesus calls us to an expectation that not only those who are same-sex attracted or in the LGBTQ community, they can't meet that expectation. But the truth is none of us can. That every single one of us are condemned without Jesus. And every single one of us have to wrestle to the ground the parts of our lives that are the most difficult for us to surrender. And every single one of us have pieces and parts that we're just drawn to for some reason so much stronger than anything else. And maybe we can't explain it. Maybe there's no really good explanation and no really good answer. But that's the call in all of our lives. Good morning, Jesus. You're in the lead today. And when Jesus is in the lead in our lives, we certainly can have tension in his expectations for us and our inability to seemingly meet those expectations. But something that we always have control over is how we love our neighbor. And when one smart aleck religious person got really just a little talkative with Jesus, Jesus took the time to explain to him, every single person is your neighbor. I'm incredibly proud to lead a church that lives in that tension of creating a You Belong Here movement week in and week out. It's incredibly difficult. And there will be some churches that look at our approach to loving our neighbor and think we ought to sprinkle just a little more hate in. And they're welcome to think that. I am confident, incredibly confident, that Jesus is in the lead. And so we will continue to wake up every day and love the Lord our God with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, strength. And we will love our neighbor as ourselves. Especially those who are marginalized, dehumanized in our communities. Sarah, I don't know if you're watching today. If you are, love you. And I got your text this morning saying you were praying for me today. It made my day. Thank you. And I've got calls in to a few friends in Pennsylvania to find a church. And I hope to follow up with you this week.